Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking a systematic deep breath and plunging into one of the most frustrating aspects of modern life,
Hmm.
the chasm of societal division. You know that feeling? It seems like everyone is just locked into this us versus them mentality,
Right.
and we've kind of forgotten how to talk, let alone collaborate.
And that polarization, it isn't accidental. That's really the core focus of the source material we're dissecting today. We're trying to move past the day-to-day politics.
Yeah, past the surface disagreements.
Exactly, to look at the underlying behavioral psychology of division. So our mission for you is to pull a structured, almost scientific roadmap for unity directly out of the data.
And the source we're working from, What Unites US Divides Us, it comes with a really fascinating pedigree. The author, Duane Cross, is a behavioral psychologist who spent, over 45 years in the trenches of organizational change?
That's right. I mean, we're talking about a guy who focused on group dynamics and cultural overhauls for Fortune 400 companies globally,
The big players.
for the big players.
Yeah.
And that's the real nugget here. Duane Cross realized that the principles required to create these high-performing, unified, successful corporate teams, the exact same principles, the same psychological and environmental dynamics, that we need to heal a deeply divided society. He's taking a proven playbook for organizational success and applying it to, well, the biggest social challenge of our time.
So our mission is clear then. We're going to distill the science of belonging, unpack the core drivers of group identity, and zero in on these actionable concepts that show how lasting societal collaboration really starts with individual awareness.
Yep.
We need to know not just why we divide, but, how we rebuild.
So let's unpack the science.
We have to begin where the source material does, which is by raising the stakes to an almost existential level. The provocative question it poses is this: are we so divided by our beliefs, our ideologies, our loyalties, that we no longer value our diversity or even find commonality?
It's a sobering assessment for
It
sure.
really is.
And the material is, I think, designed to be a wake-up call about the profound danger in that. This isn't just about having, tense family gatherings. The author warns that ignoring the devaluation of diversity starts a catastrophic and predictable sequence.
Okay, tell us that sequence again, because this is what transforms it from a psychological deep dive into, a historical warning.
It starts when diversity is no longer valued. So when you stop seeing difference as a strength and start seeing it as a threat.
Adversity follows.
Adversity follows. Now, adversity itself is tough, but it's manageable. The real danger is what adversity quickly breeds, and that's hatred.
And hatred, that leads to the inevitable outcome.
Exactly. Hatred leads to conflict.
Yeah.
And the ultimate risk the source outlines, and this is backed by historical patterns, is that unchecked, severe conflict can lead directly to the fall of civilizations.
Okay, that is a terrifying escalation. Adversity, hatred, conflict, collapse. I have to ask, isn't this maybe a little dramatic? Are we really on a path to societal collapse because we disagree about, infrastructure bills?
Well, the material argues that we need to stop thinking about these things as isolated political disagreements. We need to start viewing them as indicators of a systemic breakdown in valuing difference.
Okay.
Historically, when a society's core operating principle shifts from how can we leverage all our different skills to we must eliminate those who are different to survive, the foundations just erode so quickly. The author's point is that the devaluation of diversity initiates that sequence. It's the spark.
So if the stakes are truly that high, that ignoring this devaluation of diversity puts us on a path that is historically proven to end in collapse, then the question becomes incredibly urgent. How do we interrupt that flow? Where do we even start?
We start by recognizing that unity and division aren't just random moods. They are fundamentally predictable responses. Responses to the dynamics between people and the environments they create. We have to address that core mechanism.
Okay, let's unpack that. If unity and division are just responses, what's the specific science behind them that the source is getting at? Because it's not enough to just say people join groups. This goes much deeper into identity and even biology, right?
Oh, absolutely. The research tackles two massive questions. The first is sort of the macro view. How does the established history of group thinking, the science of belonging, that tribal impulse, how does that impact the deep divisions we see today at all levels?
Right, individual, group, society.
All of it. We are wired for groups.
And the second question, the microview, that's the one I found most surprising when I was digging into the source notes. It tackles our individual identity and a really key element, our genetic predisposition.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. The material looks at how our individual wiring a biological component determines our initial responses to diverse opinions, how it drives our social group behaviors.
So it's suggesting that some of us are maybe genetically more predisposed to prioritize in-group safety.
In-group safety and cohesion, yeah. Over-engaging with external diverse ideas.
Wait, so this isn't just about my childhood environment or what I learned. The source is suggesting there might be a genetic component that makes some people just naturally more resistant to ambiguity and difference.
That's the implication. It's not a destiny, to be clear, but it is a predisposition. Think of it less as a division gene and more as a powerful ancient wiring for immediate survival.
For our ancestors living in tribes.
Exactly. Loyalty to the small in-group was everything. It was paramount for staying alive. The other was a potential threat.
So this deep-seated need for safety, potentially expressed through our genetics, it manifests today as an instantaneous, almost subconscious resistance to opinions or identities that fall outside our defined political or social tribe.
Yeah.
It makes the challenge feel less like a lack of manners and more like a deeply embedded human mechanism we have to actively manage.
Precisely. And if we don't actively manage that predisposition, we just default to our tribal wiring, which of course reinforces the us versus them dynamic. So the great challenge is creating an environment that's strong enough and safe enough to override that genetic impulse toward division.
Which brings us straight back to the author's background in organizational design. If these are predictable responses to the environment, what's the blueprint? What's the perfect organizational structure for a safe, unified, collaborative environment?
The source is crystal clear on this. For any group to be successful and unified, whether it's a small team, a family, or an entire society, it has to be built on three foundational requirements. This is the playbook.
Okay, give us the 3 pillars.
1, you must have an inspiring common vision.
Right.
2, you need a compelling mission.
Okay.
And 3, you need shared values.
Vision, mission, values. I mean, that is textbook Fortune 400 strategy. But how do we apply that to society? How do we translate that corporate language into something meaningful for our daily lives? What even is society's common vision?
And that's the key translational step,
Yeah.
For a society, the vision isn't about market share. It's about defining the collective good life. What does a flourishing society look like to everyone?
A shared aspiration?
A shared aspiration. It creates a common gravitational pull. And the mission is the shared work, the actual steps we agree to take to achieve that vision.
Building infrastructure, ensuring collective safety, that kind of thing.
Right. And the shared values. That seems like the most challenging piece in a diverse society.
It really does.
Shared values are the rules of engagement. They define how we treat each other while we pursue that vision and mission. They are the non-negotiables, right? Respect for differing views, a commitment to open dialogue, honoring fundamental rights, maybe. The values are the guardrails. Without them, even a good mission just devolves into chaos.
So we've got these 3 interlocking forces that define the group's identity, but the author adds a crucial 4th element, doesn't he? You can't just write these down and walk away.
Correct. You can't. These 3 elements, vision, mission, and values, they have to be supported by a 4th, an environment that actively drives and reinforces the desired objectives and behaviors.
That makes all the difference. It's the difference between having a sign on the wall that says, be respectful, and having a system where disrespectful behavior is actively, clearly, and consistently discouraged.
Yes, exactly. If your stated value is collaboration, but the internal environment only rewards ruthless solo competition, the environment wins.
Every time.
Every single time. You have to design the environment, the rules, the laws, the social norms, the rewards, to constantly drive people toward the vision, mission, and values. That's how you override that innate genetic preference for tribal conflict.
And that transition, that takes us from identifying the structure to the actual prescription for change. We know what a successful unified group needs, the VMV supported by the environment. But how do we get there when we're so bogged down in that adversity, hatred, and conflict sequence?
This is where the roadmap gets really practical. The material focuses on bridging that gap through constructive action. Since adversity is unavoidable, the first question is a practical one. How do you constructively deal with adversity, both within and between groups?
Right. Conflict is guaranteed, but destructive conflict is not. What's the principle for shifting that dynamic?
The source implies a shift from positional conflict to needs-based collaboration. When people are divided, they're often arguing from a fixed, hard position. My party is right, your party is wrong.
Yeah, we've all been there.
We all have. Constructive action means leveraging the shared values to move away from attacking the person or the position and instead framing the adversity as us versus the problem. Even in deep disagreement, if you share the value of, say, societal well-being, that becomes the platform for joint problem solving.
But that requires massive cultural change, though. How do you take that small shift in conflict resolution and scale it up to an entire culture? That's the second part of the roadmap, isn't it? Enabling that cultural transformation.
It is. How can we enable cultural change and move forward to a new reality? One that's enabled by shared understanding and collaboration. The roadmap isn't a single event. It's a continuous process that involves constantly reaffirming the vision, mission, and values, especially in the face of adversity. It requires leaders, and really all individuals, to model the behavior they want to see.
You make the environment conducive to collaboration rather than conflict.
You have to.
So we're synthesizing all these components, we're using the science of belonging to define our own responses, we're clarifying the foundational needs of a unified group, the VMV, and then we're providing the mechanism, constructive conflict resolution, for dealing with inevitable disagreement.
Correct. The goal is to rebuild the foundation. The ultimate aim is to empower every listener, every leader, every group to find common ground. This material is designed to stop us from feeling helpless against the tide of division and instead provide a structural way forward.
But this all comes down to a single point that I really want to emphasize. I mean, leaders and groups are abstract entities, governments feel distant. Where does the actual power of change lie?
And that is the ultimate conclusion. It's the necessary call to action of the entire framework. The source material emphasizes, again and again, that all lasting change must start at the individual level.
It has to begin with you.
Yeah.
Stepping up to manage your own psychological responses.
Absolutely. By engaging with this material, by understanding the causes and effects of unity and division, from that genetic predisposition right up through the historical path to collapse, you are uniquely equipped to initiate personal and cultural change. You gain agency.
Yeah.
You stop just defaulting to tribalism and start actively leveraging your own identity, focusing on shared values to transform conflict from something destructive into something, well, something productively collaborative.
That shift in perspective, seeing conflict as an opportunity to reinforce shared values, that's the powerful takeaway here. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? This deep dive wasn't just about reading a book. It was about equipping you to better understand the challenging cultural environment you live in today. And more practically, it's about understanding how your personal approaches, your immediate responses to conflict and diversity, can lead to more unified personal relationships and less division in your immediate sphere of influence.
And the material makes a bold promise, which is that by completing this analysis, you will be more aware of the causes and effects of unity and division than most of the population. And that level of insight is, I think, essential for navigating modern life.
It certainly provides a toolkit for engaging with conflict, not as a breakdown, but as a mandatory phase of rebuilding. We started with that stark warning that the devaluation of diversity leads down that terrifying path. Adversity, hatred, conflict that can end in the fall of civilizations. If that sequence is true. And considering the weight of that genetic predisposition to tribalism and the absolute need for a shared vision, the question for you to mull over is this. Considering how hard it is to shift cultural momentum, what is the smallest tangible way you can demonstrate valuing diversity today to interrupt that dangerous sequence? Think microactions, daily, deliberate choices.
A single, consistent action that begins the lasting cultural change, starting right where you are.
Indeed. We'll leave you with that thought. We hope this deep dive into the psychological pathway to unity has equipped you with some valuable insight. We'll see you next time.